Welcome to this guide on how to mod Vampire Survivors. There are quite a lot of amazing things that you can do, starting off very simple from just changing values to changing textures and over to creating your own unique add-ons, like for example a character, a weapon or stuff like this. But in this video I just want to give you an introduction, where's what do you have to do to get going, and for the rest you can dig deeper or I will do more guides in the future. Before we start with anything, make sure that you either use Notepad++ or a similar software that allows you to edit JavaScript files. This is pretty much what we are looking for. The second one that we need is something to edit image files. So Photoshop, Paint.net, anything that works for you is fine. In Notepad++, make sure that you have the plugin JS tool. You just have to click on Plugins, Plugins Admin, and under Available, you would just search for it. For me, it doesn't show up because I already have it installed, but yeah, that's all you would need to do, just install it. Now you just have to figure out where the save folder is. Just right click on the game, Properties, Local Files, and over to Browse. Once there, it should open up the folder, and here you have to go into Resources, App, Webpack, Renderer, and this is where you want to be. This folder that contains, where is it, the main file, the main bundle JS. I made the icons a bit bigger, but it might be that you see nothing, but the main.bundle.js is the main file that we are looking at. Let's double click this. It might ask you with what you want to open the file. Just use Notepad++ or drag and drop it in. Your file will not look like this. All you have to do is go under Plugins, JS Tool, and use JS Format. After you did that, it should look exactly like what mine is looking like. And what can you do here? You can pretty much edit all the values in the game. I'm gonna zoom in a bit because it might be hard to read. But pretty much if you want to change something like, let's say, you want to change the values of a character, okay? Let's just search for Imelda just because why not? And I'll do find next. What you're looking for is pretty much here. This row of attributes that belong to Imelda. Now this doesn't read Imelda up here. Sometimes it does read the name, sometimes it doesn't. But what you're looking for is a jar name, Imelda. Down here you can find all the values associated to this character in hexadecimals. Whenever you see the 0x in front, it's a hexadecimal. If this is not there, it's just a normal decimal. You can just use a converter to know what these values represent. But for example, 64 is the same as 100. Here's a converter I usually use, but of course you can use any converter. You just have to type in the hexadecimal number and you get the decimal number. The other way around, if for example we want to set the health to 50, then we can just convert and you can see the value is 32. So let's change her up a bit just to have some difference in the character. Down here we can see the rerolls, and this pretty much just means how many rerolls this character has without any power-ups or anything else. It's quite important to know what type of number is used here. Like here it uses a hexadecimal, but in the background it uses an integer. So just a full number or rather a decimal. It can be a comma separated number. We of course don't want that, we want to give it a solid number. So what I'll do is I'll take the 32, the hexadecimal 32 that we determined previously, and just write it in here so we get 50 rerolls. Down here I'll replace the hexadecimal just with a normal decimal number. If everything goes right, then both rerolls and skips should have the number 50 in the game. Now for something a bit more complicated, up here we can see percentage values. Now I'm not 100% sure on this, but I think the reason why these are on 1 is because this is 100%, so the base value. It doesn't show you that in the game, but if you have no effect on, for example, growth, then that means you still have 100% growth, the base value in the game. So we can increase this to whatever we want to increase it. And I'm just gonna say that I'm gonna put this at 2.5. So in theory, this should be 150% in the game. The rest that we see here is either very similar or a bit too complicated. We could, for example, change the weapon here to something else. In fact, let's just do that. Let's take whatever is up here from Antonio, the whip, I'll take that. There we go. Make sure to copy everything. Also make sure to not make any mistakes. If you make a mistake, the game will just stay black when it loads, so it's not critical, but depending on where you made a change, it might also happen within the game. So for example, if you edit what happens on a level up, then it will only crash once you level up. If we scroll down, we can see what happens on certain level ups with her. So we can see 10% growth is gained on level 5, another 10% is gained on level 10, and another 10% is gained on level 15. This is exactly what we see in the game. Down here something quite interesting happens, and this means that on level 20 she gains 100% experience. If you check your character when you're level 20, most of the characters have this, then you'll see that he has bonus 100% greed, just for that level. And down here explains why it's only for that level, because here it will get removed again. So this is also how you decrease values, just with a negative number. Up here we have level 40, another 100%, and down here we'll remove the 100% a level later. If you want to edit any of these, you can change them as you please. If you want to add, for example, duration, then you can simply do that by adding duration. Just a small correction, this one here is actually in percentages, which means I gave myself 100,000%. That is obviously not right, so what we want to do now is I'll just change it to 100%. So a 1. And how about we make our own one? All you have to do is copy this part, and we will add it to the very bottom. As you can see, it looks exactly the same as the other level ups, and I'll just say this is the level up 13, so I'm gonna change this to a D. Again, you can use the converter to know what does what. I'm gonna remove this up here, I don't need that. And now I'm gonna say once she reaches that level, I want to give her growth. I'm gonna remove the minus, and I want to give her 500% growth. That is quite a lot. Next up, I'll add cooldown. And for this one, we use a negative value, and I'm just gonna use 0.5. To check this out, all you have to do is save the file. You can't do this while the game is running, it will not accept it. And now you just have to click on play. Going into the game, the first thing you should notice is that she has a whip. The next one is that growth is at 165%. That's because of our added 150%, as well as the power-ups that I'm using. We have reroll at 50, plus 2 from the power-ups, and 50 skips. If you remember, one was using the hexadecimal, the other was using the decimals. But now let's check if the level ups work properly. Now that we reach level 5, we can see that our duration increased to 130%. And on level 13 we can see that our cooldown is decreased by 50%. That is something good, that means half the speed. In case you're wondering what's going on here, I'm working on a German mod that just changes some stuff to German stereotypes. So for example, here we have Hans. If you want to see that, just feel free to subscribe and I'll show it to you in the future. But I would say let's get back to the modding. If you want to see examples about what you can do with modding, for example, I did Thor, I did Minino, Maxino, those are just versions of MissingNo with really high, really low numbers, and, well, I have a comment pinned and you can just check out some videos to get an idea of what you can do. I would say for now we leave the main bundle, because I will do this in a future tutorial where I'll show what exists in the bundle and what you can do, and let's go back into the folder. So over here there are quite a few other things. For you it will be a bit less, but one that is quite dangerous to mod is the save data backup. I highly recommend you to do nothing in there unless you really know what you're doing, because if you mess this up, then your game is probably not gone, but you might have some serious issues. So let's ignore that. Only do this if you really know what you're doing, meaning you make a backup. I don't care about the rest, but make a backup. But for now, let's go into assets. And what you can see here are different very interesting folders. All of these matter to us. Right here we have sounds. This is used for my German Hans video where I replace some stuff with more or less typical German music. Then we have the tile sets. This is actually something really interesting. It has all the textures that are used in the game in here. So if you want to change something, for example, what the map looks like, you can just replace a tree or the basic tiles that are used or whatever. And if we go back, then we have the language, images, and fonts. Now this one is one I honestly don't care about. I have done nothing in here, so I don't even know what it does. Feel free to explore it for yourself. But let's take a look at the choosier ones. Language is pretty much everything that has to do with what is written in the game. Just because I'm currently in the modded version that I was talking about, I'll show you what I changed. So if we go inside of here, and I will just search for Hans, because that is the name of the character, you can see that this is actually Gennaro, and his character name is Hans. This will replace the name in the game. His description is, gets the Flammenwerfer, because why not, and his surname is Peter. You can change that for whatever language you want to change, just make sure that you're in the one that you actually want to edit. But what is more interesting is weapon lang, so weapon language. Just for an example that you saw in the game, as you can see, the cross is the Seitenwurst and the heaven sword is the Bratwurst. Anything you change here has no meaning for the game itself, it's just how it's shown. What I mean by that is, if it says require spellbinder, then this only means this is text. Even if you change this to something else like spinach, it won't make the game use spinach instead. And for the rest, you can just check through and change whatever you want to change, but I would say enough for now. Let's actually take a look at the images, because they are the most exciting part about this. Once you get into the folder, you'll notice, oh, there's quite a lot, and this might be hard to get used to, because these are sprite sheets. Now, there are sprite unpackers, and there was one for Vampire Survivors. I don't know if he still works, but you're probably best off to just get used to working with sprites within the sprite sheet. I'm not going to go into detail with all of these, but the four main ones that I want to take a look at is items, enemies, characters, and VFX. If you open items, you probably don't have multiple layers over here, but the point is, it shows all the items in the game. And while you might say that weapons are no items, well, those are the ones that are shown on the top left. So if you got a weapon, then it's shown over there. Yeah, this sausage is quite poor done, I have to redo this. Hey, there's not a lot of space, okay? But whatever you change over here will not affect the actual weapon. So you can change the bone, for example, to ebony wings, or whatever, as long as it fits actually, because they have different sizes. But it won't change anything about what the weapon looks like. It only changes the top left, where all the weapons are stored that are shown to you. So let's take a look at a more interesting one, for example VFX. What you can see here are the actual animations that happen in the game. Over here, this is the Soul Eater, we have a lot of pentagram going on, and down here, this is for example my Bratwurst. You know, a Brötchen. So it's with some senf. So that's really nice. I actually want one right now. But yes, this is where I had to change this. Again, I'm still working on this. I literally just started today. So don't judge what I did so far. I'm just testing as well. But whatever you want to change here, projectile-wise or so, you can do that in here. Sometimes it's also nice to just go through and see certain things that appeared out of nowhere, because most of the time they will appear in the next update. Next up we have characters, and these are all the characters currently in the game. Don't get confused, this down here is not a death animation, this is missing now. So if you want to change him back to his old texture, this is where you have to replace them. But as you can see, this is where I have my Hans that will be used for the future, and I pretty much just took Gennaro and I replaced whatever he had. And lastly, we have probably the most confusing file. While the others had more or less some order, this one is rough. If you want to edit enemies, and this is also probably the reason why I won't do it for my mods, is yeah, quite complicated. Because you have to find all the singular parts that belong to an enemy. So we have the skull floating here. Here it's also floating, but closer to the ground. Here it got destroyed and it starts disappearing. Here it's even more disappearing halfway through. And yeah, if you would want to find the skull, good luck, because what is the skull texture over here? If you want to look at the stuff, you can just click through and see what they do. You also have the JSON files according to them, so this will say where does what come from. This is quite useful because here you can see Popea, the first image of her, is 22 pixels wide, 31 pixels high, and we can see that she's in the location 27 on the x coordinates, 1 on the y, and she is 22 wide, 31 high. If we look at the character sheet, we can see yes, she is indeed at the very beginning. And the very first picture that we see on the top left is this one over here. That one is Popea 4, meaning this is the 4th frame that is played when she's animated. Then the one next to it is Popea 01, the one next to that is Popea 02, and the last one is Popea 03. Now, while they are in order here, you always have to check what are the x coordinates, what are the y coordinates, and then you can just count the amount of pixels. As I said, if you want to see future modding videos and future tutorials, feel free to subscribe. But either way, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'm out.